Good evening and welcome to the University of Michigan on a very snowy night. We're happy to see as many of you in the audience as have been able to make your way into the Museum of Art this evening. My name is Brad Taylor and I'm the Associate Director of the Museum Studies program here at the University of Michigan. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Wayne LaBar's talk this evening, the third in our year-long series, Reimagining Engagement, Emerging Opportunities for Museums and Audiences. The presenters in this year's series are individuals whose work addresses the legacy of several generations of computing and the rise of the internet on audiences and their museums. While early evidence of this impact showed itself in the automation of museum collection management systems and the general flowering of museum websites, museum audiences also experienced similar developments in the ability to pull treasures from museums around the world directly onto laptops located on kitchen tables, in library cubicles, and coffee shops in their own worlds. Today, newer technologies such as iPods, iPhones, and social networking technology have changed the game yet again, creating the expectation that museum visitors will soon have the ability to customize a user-centered museum experience in much the same way that we now fully expect the ability to personalize our music, our information, and maintain our social relationships. While not every speaker in this series will be focusing on issues directly related to technology, each will address some aspect of the new world in which museums and their audiences now find one another. It's been a very interesting year so far. This evening, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Wayne LaBar, Vice President of Exhibitions and Featured Experiences and Principal in Charge at the Liberty Science Center in Jersey City, New Jersey. Wayne has more than 20 years' experience working in planning, project management, exhibition design development and implementation, and technology and networking in exhibition settings. He has developed and designed an impressive array of exhibitions, including Skyscraper, Achievement and Impact, which was an award-winning exhibition. His current projects include Breakthroughs, an exhibition about science and technology in the news, Science Now, Science Everywhere, an innovative cell phone-based project, and a new exhibition called Cooking, which Wayne will be speaking about this evening. Wayne LaBar has presented his work in an extensive number of venues and has authored several articles and book chapters, all of which deal with technology and public engagement in museums, science centers, and cultural institutions. This evening, Mr. LaBar will draw upon his most recent work, which focuses on the use of social networking technologies in the community curation or exhibition planning of Cooking, an exhibition currently being planned for the Liberty Science Center. It's scheduled to open later this year, October, I think you said today. Wayne's work is truly redefining the way in which museums and their audiences interact and offers a new model for community engagement in the development, creation, and design of exhibitions, as we shall learn this evening. So let's get on with things. Please join me in welcoming Wayne LaBar to the University of Michigan.
Let's make sure that's working. You guys can hear me? Great. Well, thank you for coming. And knowing that there's 8 to 14 inches of snow landing out my house right now, you may have me longer than you wanted. So today I'm going to just talk a little bit about the work we've been doing at Liberty Science Center, and in some ways what we consider redefining our relationship with our visitors and possibly redefining what a museum can be in a variety of ways. And so I will culminate, as Brad mentioned, with the Cooking project, but I have the opportunity here to just walk you through some of the development process at Liberty Science Center. So this is where we all started so very long ago. This is Worm's cabinet of curiosities, his collection at that time. And when we look at that compared to perhaps a modern exhibition space, there really isn't a lot of difference, a lot of evolution in terms of what we find on the museum floor. The physicality of the objects, the physicality of the exhibits, and the technology that we use has not really evolved very much if we look at where museums have been even recently. And looking at what we might see in modern day exhibitions, and I just chose 4 images here that show a variety of things we interact with when we go to museums often. These, while certainly there are technological evolution going on and evidenced in these images, they don't really represent a fundamental shift in the relationship between the museum and the visitor very much. And the way I would represent that is that we have been working for a very long time in what I call the radial model. In other words, that information flows from the museum to the visitor. And that communication link is defined for me in some very limiting terms. First, it's certainly one directional. It comes, the museum is trying to communicate something to the visitor. It's controlled by the museum. When the museum creates something, it is in control of the content. It is controlled with a specific medium, whether it's exhibition, could be educational programs, in fact, a variety of things. It's also resource controlled. In other words, when we think about creating an exhibition and exhibitions that I worked on earlier in my career, all of the resources being used to create and send that message are owned by the museum primarily. And in fact, we are limited by the amount of resources the museum can actually use to send that message. And then it's been location specific. The fact that actually information from the museum is communicated to the visitor primarily, and a high percentage of the time in this model, at the site of the museum itself. So we're very much assigned to the physicality of the structure and what goes on in that space. Very early on, Lawrence Lessing, in this new world of the internet, and as things were emerging about creative content on the web, wrote this book, Free Culture. And Lawrence is for many of you probably recognize this, but he's the creator of the Creative Commons concept, the legal system now used often on the web to share information between individuals and organizations in a way that preserves rights, but also allows a lot of use by that. And he wrote in that book that digital technologies tied to the internet could include a much wider and more diverse range of creators. Those creators could produce and distribute a much more vibrant range of creativity. And I think we are seeing that in the internet today, and we shouldn't be surprised that actually is something that might affect how museums operate and the sort of information we carry and the relationship we have with the visitor. And in fact, there have been 2 major changes empowered by the internet that I think are fundamentally changing that radial model. The first is the fact of social media. And while we may associate that typically with something like Facebook, just the concept that the internet has empowered sites and locations that allow people to share creativity information in a social aspect is very empowering, and we have seen, and we are all taking advantage of that aspect. In addition, the use of mobile devices, and in fact the rise even more powerfully of smartphones, has enabled the idea of anytime information distribution as well. And combining these two, I think, offers an opportunity to actually change radically in some ways, and in some sense three-dimensionally, the model that we just saw of the museum. So if we think of this radial model and transforming it, suddenly we have this opportunity of changing the arrows and actually creating new arrows. And in fact, in thinking through this one day, it made me realize that obviously what's happened is that, and some of the things that people are doing, is offering an opportunity to communicate back and forth with the museum between visitors. And perhaps even more importantly, the museum facilitating communications between visitors and in fact, perhaps the museum not being even involved at all in that linkage. But as soon as you do this and draw this on a napkin, which I happen to do, there's something that became very apparent to me is that, well, I was missing a couple of arrows. And so I had to think about this three-dimensionally, which then got me thinking that actually perhaps a more complicated, but a clear image would be something along these lines, where in addition to the back and forth between the museum and the visitors, and we know that we have where the visitors are spatially is actually of no importance, so there's communications going back and forth, not to adjacent visitors, but also to visitors that may be once or even further removed from each other, that in addition to all of this, those visitors are actually communicating to the rest of the world and not just let's just call it the little solar system that's around the museum. And as I looked at this, Brad didn't mention that my degree is in aerospace engineering, and so sometimes I tend to actually immediately move to technology or some sort of engineering metaphor. And this object here reminded me very specifically of a certain piece of technology, and that's a gyroscope. And when I started thinking about this and thinking about what a gyroscope does, I suddenly realized to myself that some of the stuff we've been doing, some of this relationship changing concept actually might be, the idea of a gyroscope might be very applicable to the museum world in a sense. And so just to remind ourselves what a gyroscope is, this is a definition, a Webster's definition of an apparatus consisting of a rotating wheel so mounted that its axis can turn freely and in certain or all directions, and capable of maintaining the same absolute direction in space in spite of movements of the mountings and surrounding parts. And so when you think about gyroscopes, for those of you who may be a little fuzzy about what's so important about a gyroscope, once you start it spinning and the centrifugal force that goes on in a gyroscope, what it does is if you move the gyroscope from the direction it was when you started the spinning and the direction it was headed in, it wants to return back to the original position it was in. And so we're able to use that resistance of movement of a gyroscope to help us guide things like space rockets, airplanes, and other major forms of technology. But when I looked at this definition, I thought to myself, well, what if what we're doing with this relationship definition and through this technology is actually creating something about a museum? And so I looked at the definition and suddenly sprung to mind that perhaps what we've been really talking about is a gyroscopic museum. And what I mean by that is a museum consisting of relationships with its visitors that can respond freely in certain or all directions and capable of being a relevant resource in spite of movements and changes in content and the surrounding world. In other words, the ability for us to communicate and have a relationship with our visitors in a back and forth, and to do so in a way that allows them to express creativity as well as content, and as well as freeing ourselves a little bit from the spatial relationship of the museum itself, allows our institutions to actually be more flexible and more capable of responding to a world that is changing very rapidly, in terms of content and in terms of its relationships with each other. So when I thought of this definition of a gyroscopic museum, I started examining the kinds of things that we've been doing and allowing this to happen. And so what I would like to take you through is just a couple of samples of that process in the at Liberty Science Center. And the first, I should have mentioned this. So first of all, what is a gyroscopic museum? There's bidirectional information and content between the world of the museum and between visitors and not even involving the museum and the rest of the world. In fact, if we were to think about this, if we can create change in a visitor, whether it's an appreciation of art or learning something about science and technology that allows them to make a difference in our world, and the fact that that person may communicate that directly with another visitor and not involve us is certainly a way of leveraging what a museum is about in a very powerful way, and I would assess is something that we would all love to do. And in fact, the relationships independent of the museum may be a more important thing than we do sometimes directly between the museum and the visitor, and actually has made me think, how do we even try to measure that sort of impact? Third is that everybody has resources, and so I think you'll see some of this in the materials we'll provide, and I will talk about later. But what this means is that by engaging visitors in sort of the effort the museum is undergoing as well, we suddenly have added resources to the desired impact we as a museum may want. So therefore, if the visitor has a cell phone, if the visitor is able to create content on the internet, if the visitor has other resources that they can apply to sending the same message that we are trying to say or relate with the visitor, then suddenly we've amplified the number of resources applicable to our impact. And then suddenly, as museums, being relevant to the context of the rest of the world becomes very much more important in this model. So the first project we'll just talk about, and Brad mentioned it in my introduction, is Science Now, Science Everywhere. This is the name we came up for our mobile device project. And this is one of those times when you come up with you're trying to think of a name, and then you think of you think of a really cool analogy in the name, and then you come up with what the acronym means. So we thought of Sensei as the teacher, the Asian teacher concept. And so we then came up with Science Now, Science Everywhere as a way of talking about using mobile devices and accessing content immediately and anywhere you go. And so this has come out in several versions at the Science Center. I should let you know, when we first started in 2006, we were debating whether the device to use was an iPod, a PDA, or a cell phone, and we opted for cell phone, and we ended up luckily choosing the right devices, the one that we now commonly use instead of, we're not all walking around with PDAs anymore. They've all merged onto this idea that it's also the device you can make a telephone call with. We also erred in this project of not depending on smartphones. So you won't see any examples here that require you to actively link to the internet per se. You can do this all by either audio or SMS messaging. In this case, when we started, there weren't that many smartphones, and we decided to err on trying to use the simplest device possible as part of the process. So the first thing we did is probably not not brain surgery, is the idea of doing additional audio content to our visitors. So this is a way of at least beginning an interaction with the visitors. If you want to, that number's live, and feel free to make a call right now and listen to hearing what water monitors actually eat. And you will find these throughout the Liberty Science Center at this point. I should mention, we did this on a shoestring budget. So when this started, it originally was, we chose 20 extensions on our a telephone system at the Science Center that staff weren't using. And so basically, you were just calling somebody's office extension, or you were calling the water monitor's office extension. And instead of being able to leave a message, you just heard the kind of the message you would say, like, "Hi, my name is Wayne, I'm not in my office right now." Instead of that whole message, you heard one of our animal husbandry staff describe what these guys eat. We've now moved to a internet-based system on our phone system, so this has gotten a little more complicated in the process, but you get the idea of what we were doing. But we then began to expand what we could do, and this was part and parcel of a major expansion of Liberty Science Center. And so the next way in which we were communicating and engaging visitors in a way of accessing information without being tied, this is just beginning steps of not being tied to the physical location of the Science Center or the physicality of the exhibit, is this exhibit called Leave Your Mark. There's two ways of interacting with this exhibit. One is that you can supply the exhibit data that gets then portrayed on the giant screen that's in front of that visitor. And another way is that you get to play around with the data a little bit. So just to explain this a little bit, it's what you're seeing here is a measurement of how much a person communicates. So the colors of the circles on the diagram on the right represent, I think I have a laser here that I can actually point. Okay, the colors represent the ages of the individuals. The size of the circle represents the scale of amount of communication that you give. So, in other words, earlier in the exhibit, you're asked, how often do you write your friends? How often do you? Am I not? Oh, is that more powerful than mine? Oh.
Oh, is it? I didn't see that you had one.
Oh, I did get one. I'm sorry. That's fine. Thanks. So, how often do you write? How often do you text? How often do you send photos to people, etc., and your circle will shrink or expand. And the number and letters is just the like EB98. It's just a way of identifying you. You're told that you give the initials and then you're given a number just to individualize the circles. The axis on the data is these three circles. So this says instant and text messaging, emails, and you can't read this because one of the visitors are over it, but it's cell phone. And what you're able to do is you can put those three circles in any location, and the other circles will move dynamically in response to where you put those three axis points. So we can find out by putting these two together all the people that use this a lot, while the people who tend to move over to here use this more than that. And as you can see, this individual over here does not use these two forms of communication at all and uses instant text messaging a lot greater. The way we use your cell phone is that there's one station to put inputs, but if it's being used, multiple people can add data to this live by using their cell phone as a way of actually interacting with the exhibit and adding data to the system. And then another exhibit that we have, which I'll come back to in a second, is in creating your own pictograms. You learn about what are pictograms and how they're used to communicate. One of the things that you can do is create your own, and with your cell phone, you're actually able to save that image to put on your cell phone screen. So here's a way in which not only I'll come back to this, that not only are we having visitors communicating back to the exhibit through creating their own piece of work, but then we're also sending it back to them and they can show it around when they walk around. But this was all preliminary for a much more expanded use of the cell phone, which is our camera phone challenge. And this is something that's still rolling out at the Science Center. But here we are, we acknowledge that most everybody on their cell phone has the ability to take photographs. And so whether you go to our website when this is fully implemented, or live at the Science Center, which you can do at the Science Center now, you can create an account and then participate in a photo challenge that we can create every day at the Science Center. And here now what's happened is we're now beginning to really explore this idea of first of all interplay between the visitor and us, And secondly, the idea that we can actually engage visitors to do something related to content that may not even be tied to the Science Center. So for example, we could create a challenge up here about find the water monitor lizard and take the best shot you can of it. And of course, we would have a whole bunch of submissions from people who are coming to the Science Center who see the water monitor lizard, and they take shots and they post them on the site. What you probably could see here is that we also allow the opportunity of voting, and the idea would be to find the best, who gets, by public acclamation, the best picture of the water monitor lizard. But what this allows us also to do is create challenges that may not even occur at the Science Center. So we could say, go out into the area around in your neighborhood and find the best example of X, Y, or Z related to science and technology. And suddenly we are now engaging visitors live with the same messages we're talking about the Science Center, but now outside of the physical, being tied physically to the Science Center. So for us, this represents a major new step in how we of us doing science now and science everywhere as part of it. In addition, you should know that part of this process is that you can friend other people. Some of this will be very familiar. When we first started this programming about 2 years ago or so, some of this was kind of newish. And you can create your own challenges amongst your friends. So suddenly now, while we provide the platform, we may not even be involved in the communication that's going on about what's going on the site. Just some quick data and information if you're interested. Currently we have 40 stations audio, 38 audio, 3 SMS, and MMS is I just consider that whole network of the photo challenge as our MMS system. Our most popular stations are audio. I should say that the audio stations are most popular with older individuals. Kids tend not to use their cell phones for voice at all. They use them primarily for SMS. We also find that the less interpretation we give in a textual context, the more the cell phone is used. Also what I would say is if you're thinking about or how these get used in museums, the more you put out, the better the response of the use of the device. In other words, if you have a major exhibition and you only have 2 or 3 opportunities to use your cell phone as part of the interpretation of an exhibition, you won't get as much use of those sites as if you had an exhibition where almost all the exhibits use, or you're able to use your mobile device. That's probably just comes from a repetition of messaging to the visitor as they're walking through the site. I should point out, I just want to go back, hold on one second, let me just go back faster than clicking through a whole bunch of slides. We did do a lot of prototyping, and this was our first signage of this system. This is just has nothing really, this is our first signage of the system, and this is our new signage of the system. The major difference here, I hope is evident, is color. And what we found is that when we were putting, hold on one second, it's probably easier with my mouse than, when we were putting these signs out, despite all of what you see there, we got clear indications that people thought we were saying, do not use your cell phone at this exhibit. And that's because it's red and orange. That was the only reason. As soon as we changed these to green, cell phone usage went up dramatically. It just goes to show you how simple a thing you learn in testing your exhibits. Some challenges, we've had some coordination challenges with our own web team and us, and how this all works, because the web team is not part of the exhibit team, et cetera, et cetera. Putting stations where you want people to sign up for MMS, if they're not walking to those locations, you're not going to get MMS usage, so figuring all of that out. Also the idea of integrating experiences in a much more coherent way between using mobile devices and not just being an add-on is a major challenge as we work forward through this, something we're thinking about in future exhibitions. There are some audience limitations. Not everybody has a cell phone or remembers to bring their cell phone into the museum. It's hard to believe, but at least when I think about it, but that is the spot. And just finding the sweet spot between interacting live, especially in a museum where you're using interactives and mobile devices, is a challenge as we think about how to do this. And certainly extending it to implementation outside of the museum walls is a challenge as well. I would say that since we started this process, the idea in the smartphone area, that there is now a lot of applications out there where science is, at least in our context, and I've seen art as well, that the idea of science of applications that have content related to what a museum does is not just limited to the museums anymore. So this is all dynamically changing quite often. The second way in which we have tried to create the Gyroscopic Museum is through two projects. One is the Exhibit Commons, and one, which I'll get to later, is cooking. And the Exhibit Commons sort of is, one could almost think of as a mega umbrella of the idea of involving the visitor in actually creating the exhibitions that you find at the Science Center. And the Exhibit Commons concept was all started in our heads from this book by Chris Anderson from Wired, which was the idea of the long tail. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this concept now, but the idea of, this happens to be the long tail of Wikipedia, the idea where it was first related that I learned about was in Amazon, how the reason why Amazon makes money is because while they certainly have a certain number of books that sell a lot, what they do is they have a lot of books that sell only very small numbers, but because there are people who really find those subjects of extreme interest, and that there are people who are interested in everything, you can actually make an economic model about this. So our thought, when we first started the Exhibit Commons, was that we could create exhibits where we might be able to engage very select people in more intense usage of the exhibition in certain ways. What we didn't know was whether visitors would be willing to actually interact with other visitors' information. Is that of interest to other visitors? And could we actually move from, you'll see some early examples of what seems to be popular over on the left, and then could we actually move and engage some very select individuals on the right, which we were not that successful with. So you're here, you'll get to see a little bit of what didn't work. Although we had some very unique successes in those failures. So the first example, which you've seen already, this is an exhibit in our communication gallery called Pictogram. And as you saw on that slide earlier, we allow you to learn what our pictograms guess, what current pictograms represent. But we also let you create pictograms. And so you can create your own on the left. That's the top button up here. You can play a guessing game about current pictograms. You can view the whole catalog of pictograms in the world, which is basically just a common disk for graphic designers. But here we found in studies of the use of the exhibit that these two are the most popular parts of the program. And in fact, many people don't create their own, but they want to watch and look at what other visitors. And so you're seeing an example of those, but very, very successful. People love to peruse other visitors' content. And so some recent, while you see 5, 6 examples, I'll just give you some of, we chose our favorites just to do that. So people got very artistic, and this might link you to immediately say, oh, I can imagine there's a content curatorial problem with this exhibit. And indeed, we do have to pull an occasional sign or two off of the pictogram exhibit. And that's, I don't think we pulled this one, but I think this one we let stay up. People get very artistic about those. There might be little stories going on between visitors, and so you can see the author's name is actually more, I always think is the title of this one, but it's it's not, but there's certainly something being said about that. And this is one of the ones we had to actually pull, to give you just an example of what we get. So we then, in wanting to really capture the idea of the creation of content and allowing visitors to talk to each other, this is a further development of that concept that's in our communication gallery. And at this exhibit, what we allow visitors to do is create your own story by looking through images on the internet that are gathered by this program live every day. And you're able to assemble a series of pictures in these bars, and then write a 1-sentence or 2-sentence, I think we allow a certain amount, it's almost like a Twitter length, amount of content that you want to say about those pictures. What's interesting here is that what we did is, while these are the stations where you create the stories, the star of the program is actually just in viewing visitors' stories. And so just to give you an example of what you can do, you can choose subjects, a series of images come out, and here's a picture, and it actually pulls a title from where the source of the image was, and you can assemble a series of images down below here, and then you can give your viewpoint and title your exhibition as you want, and then you can publish the story, which throws it up on the major screen. And so we have been getting constant stories since we've opened the exhibition in 2007, and this is how they're portrayed on the museum floor. So what we have here is a time bar that allows you to scroll between a certain time and a previous time on a certain day. You can also select the date and go back and forth, and well, you can't go forward in time, but you can go back in time and see what other people have done. You're seeing separate stories that have come up. As you can imagine, we get examples of stories that are more thoughtful and some that are just simplified. But we do get some interesting examples of stories. This was, I had chosen 3 early stories from the beginning of when we opened the exhibition. This was a political statement by a visitor, somebody who, I find it very interesting that their title of their point of view is that life has amazing things, and Google is part of that example. And then just some interesting ideas that people observe in photographs. So this is your hands, and a look at some famous people and what they were doing with their hands during that time. Here we were just allowing visitors to actually create the work within the framework of the exhibition and provide content. But our real goal on the Exhibit Commons website and on this page was to allow people to actually modify the exhibit itself. This was the culmination of what we were trying to do, where we have created a structure of the exhibition, but could we find a way in which we could have visitors actually modify the exhibit and get involved in the process of the exhibition? And probably the one that we thought would be the most interest was our graffiti wall. Now, what I'm going to show you here is a video. We don't have to see the whole video of, and I'm sorry for the quality of these. These weren't recorded at the highest grade that I got them from the people who supplied them to me. But we'll take a look here at how the exhibit works. And our idea, I'll just step back for a second. In terms of communication, we really wanted to graffiti is a modern form of communication. So we wanted to allow visitors to try their hand at graffiti. We wanted to do it in a way that was safe, and so we came up with a digital concept to do that. And this is the video of the exhibit. So, let me just turn the volume up. So it's a very popular exhibit, and basically what we have, and the only issue with this video is you're seeing the hot spot of the spray cans a little stronger than it really does on.
This is the original graffiti wall. You basically can draw whatever you want, and it doesn't leave a trace afterwards. So basically what you do is it's just like the other ones. You can choose a color over here. Then you select whether you want a small line, a large line, or an eraser. So I'm just going to draw my name.
Please try again.
And you can draw that, and then you can erase it. And
so you get the idea. It's pretty pretty basic. What people find first of all, there's a lot of visual clues or cues that actually make it feel like you're really doing graffiti in the case that you're actually holding something that looks exactly like a spray can. You're actually pressing a button in the right spot where a spray can is when you're spraying graffiti, although I wouldn't know that. I've never done graffiti myself. And then, obviously we have a wall. Now, our concept here was, when you really distill this exhibit down to its most basic form, is that it's basically a really dumb paint program that only allows you to do one thing. And what we did is we instructed the programmer to allow it to be easily modified in certain ways. And then our goal was on Exhibit Commons is we wanted people to come in and modify the exhibit. So I can tell you that from a standpoint of issuing that possibility and putting it on the web, we have not gotten a single submittal ever for the graffiti wall, except once. And so I'm about to show you the 3 examples we got. Because what happened, and it just goes to the success that did occur, which in the way museums operate, where you have a success and then never really act upon it ever again in some ways, is we actually had a class come and take this exhibit under their wing, and they actually created 3 programs for the exhibit. 3 students in high school created these, and the teacher created 3 programs for the exhibit. So you're about to see the 3 programs. This is the teacher. And this is the modification he made to the program. Oh, I'm sorry, I just advanced the slide. I need to actually click the video.
This one I wrote. Basically what you have is living graffiti. So graffiti on the other board is one in which, it's been running for a while, is one in which the paint, like you would paint on a brick wall, but the paint stays there. In this case we have kind of graffiti of the future, in which I can draw a graffiti line, but the computer then makes it come alive as if this is a digital wall of the future, and we have the ability to paint digital graffiti. So whatever shape I give this thing, it actually retains that and it kind of snakes in that shape. If I were to make a sort of a spiral shape,
so you can imagine as you walk through these now. Well, hold on one second.
It would retain that spiral as it moves around in the screen. It runs off the screen and then comes back.
So that's Stevens. We'll go to Sam now. When you start seeing the students, it becomes.
Here's my program, and basically what it does is it has the circles of different colors follow each other. To stop it for a second, they'll follow each other in basically rainbow order, with yellow following red, green following yellow, and down. And then they'll also have these smaller circles follow one another, with this one following this one following this, and the bottom one following the biggest circle of its color. So what it ends up creating is this kind of snake tail, rainbow snake tail, and it'll basically just follow around wherever you have the light projected, and if they end up colliding, then they'll end up bouncing apart, so that you can't just kind of keep it in one spot and then just create one giant circle of one color.
So that was Sam's.
Also, I made it so that whenever somebody releases the light, they'll just reset to their starting position, so if a new person comes up to use it, they won't be left with that.
My program, what it does is that it creates these little objects called movie clips, and they get bigger until they hit a certain size, and then they're deleted, and so they go away like that. And it creates them when you press the button, and then it makes them where you actually where the cursor, or this time where the spray can is, and you go over these and the shapes change, like this one here, and this one is a circle, and they're all multicolored. And this one's a flower I made for spring. And this one
So,
was a heart. Like
certainly
that.
what
And, like,
we
you-
felt
it's
very
really nice
successful
that you
in
can
these
different
examples
really
was
fast.
that we
Maybe
had
I put it
created
randomly
an
and just
experience
stick
where
with
it was certainly
And then you have, like,
achievable
random-sized hearts
that
around here,
if a
like,
visitor had
And this one's a
enough
star, like America.
technical know-how and knowledge,
And, like, my favorite
they would
is this
be
one, just
able
because
to
it's
actually change the nature of the exhibit itself so that instead of, in some sense, instead of the graffiti as being so literal as the one on the right that's in that, still up there on the video there, that the idea of artistic creation in terms of doing something like this could be achieved as different examples by what visitors were imagining. Our goal eventually would have been, if we could have done it, was to actually have you submit an exhibit, a reuse of that exhibit, and then we would review it, make sure there was no content issues with that, and then we would call you and let you know that on
He
February.
creates a whole bunch of flowers and then expands them a bit.
On February 1st, your exhibit was going to be up at the Science Center. Come by and visit, bring your friends, etc., and actually allow the visitors to allow that program to run during that time. And you could take that ad on in the sense of for certain days you could have just a cavalcade of different visitors' interpretations of the program. What we believe was that one of the couple of problems about this is one is that just the amount of knowledge you need to be able to do this is kind of an issue. We are obviously on the long tail trying to get to those sort of geeky expert kind of people who would find this kind of cool to do. And then secondly was the fact that we felt that we had created a situation where we had done in some sense, done a lot of the fun work, creating the idea of the exhibit. And there may have been people who really wanted to talk to us about what communication was in general and get in earlier in on the project and maybe had better ideas about some of the exhibits we actually had on the floor. So as a part of that process, the new way in which we are working is part of the cooking project. And I don't know, who was here? How many people were here for the workshop this morning? 1, 2, 3. I know, and 4 over here. Okay, so some of you are going to hear some repeating here a little bit. What is the cooking project? Just to make sure we are all clear, it is well, it doesn't open 2011. Oh, right, that is 20. That's this year. October, hopefully not July. It's about a 13 to 14,000 square hundred foot exhibit. We might shrink it after the first year. It's going on tour. I'm just going to buzz through these. There's 2 versions of this exhibition that will tour. Probably about 3.5 million people we think will see this. And in doing the exhibition, we have certain impacts that we're trying to achieve in the exhibition. It's an exhibition that's talking about the basic science and technology behind cooking. So we have some scientific knowledge. We are going to be letting people cook in the exhibition. So there will be the engagement of all 5 senses as part of this exhibit. Not often do you get to taste things. Smell is somewhat used in the exhibit medium, but we're going to be using all 5. And also the fact that you might actually create something may empower you in some ways in terms of engagement. The idea of attitude, we want people to understand that science is involved in everyday parts of life. Also, we have the ability to talk about different cultures and diversity as part of the project, so that will be in there. From a behavioral side, we hope to make some impact on nutrition and diet choices through the exhibition. And then finally, we would like people to learn how to experiment a little more, take a few more risks, and something that they may be familiar with. There's also opportunity to learn a little bit about some careers involved in this whole area of food and cooking, which is rapidly very popular. And then finally, who knows, someone might learn how to cook out of their exhibition too. Just so you understand the framework of the exhibition, it's divided into 4 areas: ingredients, which is where plants, animals, molecules of fats, proteins, all of those, that basic stuff. Preparation are the physical changes. We make the food, whipping, chopping, blending, things like that. Cook is the molecular change. We make the food, normally done through heating. And then eat is the impact the food has on us. That will look at in depth a little bit about nutrition and health. But also in eat, we'll look at some of the cultural celebrations that occur through cooked meals. Programmatically, there is a kitchen theater where we are able to do major productions and the demonstrations involving, it has a real kitchen in it. It has actually a kitchen behind the kitchen to prep for the kitchen demonstrations. And then we have an outside area where we'll be growing food, possibly raising chickens, if the staff convince me, along with looking at bees and insects as part of the ecosystem inside a garden. So it's a rather large exhibit. It's got a lot of stuff in it. And we did some early audience research as part of this, a part of the exhibition, which has been shaping a lot of the development. And it's something that we're actually finding as part of how we're engaging them in the design of the exhibition as well. First of all, what we learned is, some of these actually I would say are some of the reasons why we've had success in engaging people using social media as part of the exhibition. First, cooking is seen as personal. People first think of family, of good times, and while people think of being social and creative, as we should have expected, some people think of it as, I have to cook the meal, that it's work. Secondly, a lot of people are intrigued with the idea of looking at cooking from a science concept. Third, interestingly enough, the connections they most likely make with food and cooking is not science. Maybe that's not surprising, but it's about history, culture. They also expect an exhibition on cooking to be hands-on, which is good that we're doing that. And then finally, what we learned is that the idea of the 4 circles of ingredients and cook were self-explanatory to visitors and made a lot of sense to them. And there was equal interest about visiting all 4 areas. We have involved visitors in the more traditional way, and that is in testing exhibits. This is live on the museum floor just a few months ago, where we are going to be, this is one of the exhibits that you'll be able to encounter in the exhibition when it opens. And that's an opportunity to actually cook and caramelize onions live on the exhibit floor. And you're seeing over here on the right, these 2 girls doing it. They're making scientific observations about the onions as they progress through in a certain amount of time, where they are actually recording their observations about the changes that are made to the onions, including color, texture, and taste. They actually taste the onion before, during, and after the caramelizing process. This is our project manager, who happens to be standing there because we have a very hot plate right here, and we've not designed all of the protective things that will be going on so that you can't actually touch the hot plate later on in the exhibit. But what we've done as part of the project is create this website, which we went over earlier today in a small workshop called cookingexhibition.org. And this is a site we started in about 2.5 years ago. And it's a way in which we have been engaging visitors in actually participating in the design process of the exhibition. I should mention that our goal was intrigued by looking at the world of social media and thinking that in all of this kind of stuff out there, there was an opportunity to take this way in which people have been using all sorts of this means of communicating and getting involved creatively and applying it to the exhibition process. So what we have not been doing is, at least on the surface, fundamentally changing our exhibition development process from how we were doing other exhibits. In other words, we still have a core team at the Science Center. They meet about the exhibition, and And they have the opportunity to, we design, we talk about the subject, we're doing research about the subject, and then we have regular meetings where we discuss work and develop milestones and develop product of drawings and descriptions of the exhibits, etc. What we've been doing with the site, and just to go back to the site real quick, well, actually, let me just call up the site. I'm going to break out of, I'm just going to move the site over here real quick. And actually, let me shrink it so that resolution-wise, we can I can see what's going on a little bit. Okay. Actually, I'll just do this. Now, the site's a little bigger than it needs to be, but on the site, what we do is we use this as a tool to bring the visitor into the exhibition process. And this is done in a variety of ways. One is, for example, we have a blog, and here we post drawings of, right now you're seeing drawings of some of the exhibition concepts, where we are in the design process. We're getting rather detailed in the exhibition. And we ask you're invited to provide feedback on the exhibit ideas. This is just reflective of where we are in the process. Earlier a couple years ago, when we started this process, it wasn't showing lots of exhibit ideas. It was what's interesting to you, and people were sharing content about what might be possible in the exhibition. Now we're at a process where we're actually making serious design choices, so now we're seeing more stuff from us going up there for responses back. We're also using it to talk about things that are going on as part of the exhibition. We're going to be at the South Beach Food and Wine Festival. But we have a repository in this section called the exhibition where you can download the entire floor plan of the exhibition, and as you go through here, you will find each of the sections of the exhibition, and you'll find examples of drawings of the exhibits depending on the exhibit. So, for example, I have no idea what drawing this is. This is an exhibit that looks at salt and the varieties of different types of salt there are, and you can examine them and actually get to taste the different forms of salt. So you can't see all the details, but you can print this out to your heart's content and give us comments back on it as one of the things you could do. Now, we also use the site in addition to as a way of sharing ideas from visitors to us and us to visitors about content and the exhibits. We wanted them to also be able to be part of meetings. So what we do on this site is we list, and we use this as our way of indicating to our staff when we're having a meeting, and to our external partners, and engaging visitors in that. So over here on events, all of the meetings for this exhibition are announced, and you are invited. Any member of the website can come here and find out about a meeting and decide to join a meeting. So for all of you in the audience, January 19th is our next sketch meeting. It's in the design conference room, and you can click there. And you can export it to your Outlook calendar should you want. You can also share it, etc. And if you want to dial in and be part of the conference call and engage in our discussion at the exhibit, that's the phone number. Just dial in. There's the access code, and you are part of the meeting. We also share what we're doing on the screen. So if Eleanor or Tony Ann or one of the team members has drawings to show, or we have an example, or there's something on the web that comes to somebody's mind, or somebody says on the phone, oh, you should go to the web, and it often happens. We'll go to the web, but you can link in on what's the laptop on your computer and just share what's going on the screens of the exhibit. So, and as I showed today, just going back for 1 second, if you say view all, you won't see all the meetings, but you will see that over here, we've had 123 meetings that you could have participated in as part of this process already in the exhibit process. You can also submit photos, and we have tons of photos, videos that have been supplied by visitors and staff in sharing ideas and concepts. You can send an email to other visitors and communicate to each other. And so we've created, at this point, a community of people, and we're now at, we've gained a couple of people since I last spoke. 756 people are now involved in this process of the exhibition. So often I'm asked, what have we learned of this? And so I'm going to conclude my talk with six or eight major points that we have learned out of this process of engaging the visitors in the exhibit development process. So let me just, and I'm willing, after, when we go to questions and answers, we can come back to the website if you want and take a look at it in more depth if that's something you want to do. Oh, I think I'm not on the website. I'm not on the PowerPoint. Hold on one second. There we go. So just some things we know. We've had 780 members, 750, I'm sorry, I had that number wrong, over about 30 months. I would say about 99% of all meetings people have been invited to. There are occasional meetings we do not invite the general public to. Those probably are budgetary meetings where salaries get mentioned or something along those lines. And as I mentioned, you in person, we have people who have, I should mention that people have integrated into the meetings in 3 different ways. We've had visitors or the public show up at our front door to come to the meeting. We've had people call into the meeting, and we've had people share the laptop. We have shared all the drawings and notes for this entire project on this site. You can download from the earliest napkin sketch all the way to full conceptual design and now schematic design of exhibits. You can download our entire NSF grant application, both the preliminary grant as well as the final grant, all 100 pages of it or so. You can also download all our evaluation reports and research we've had about the exhibition. And as you saw, there's a whole bunch of ways in which you can communicate back and forth between yourselves as visitors or as public and with us and become engaged in the exhibit. So what have we learned? So what we've learned is that there are a lot of people interested in the subject and you can engage a lot of people, and that you can get a great diversity of people engaged in your project and helping you out. People that you might not have imagined to people that you could only have dreamed of having as part of your project almost very quickly. So we have regular visitors over here. We have the gentleman who created culinary schools in Florida and California. These guys wrote the book, The Flavor Bible, and they also wrote, recently their biggest bestseller is what you should drink with what you should eat. And so it's a book that tells you, you look at what you're going to eat, and it tells you all the wines you should drink. Or you could look at it reverse, and you can look for the wine you have, and then figure out what you should order off the menu. And there's also now an app for this. So we have James Beard award-winning authors who are members of the site to regular visitors. We have people who are engaged with women groups and children in educating through using food and cooking, to a librarian at NYU who wrote a book all about the history of cooking television shows. This is the kind of community now that have been engaged in the exhibition, which we never would have been able to do in our normal exhibition process at the scale that we've achieved so far. So that was a major learning item out of attempting to engage the public. The second part of this is that we should have figured this out maybe earlier. Barriers get destroyed in this process that you may have or you may have never known you really thought about till you find your mom commenting on your own work. And I think this is part of this process involving social media, is understanding that suddenly the separation, and this may be more comfortable to younger people than it is to older people, and I kind of find myself somewhere between, where some days I feel comfortable and some days I'm not, that anybody can be involved in the project. It could be fellow coworkers. Imagine coworkers who you think should never be involved in the exhibition process because why should marketing or, I don't know, the finance, oh my gosh, get involved in the projects? And suddenly, because you're just inviting everybody, everybody's involved. And so those barriers from on a work organizational level to your family organizational level, suddenly anybody can be involved, and you're suddenly dealing with different worlds colliding over the same space. Also, as this might imply, suddenly we're also putting up designs of drawings, and they're not secret anymore. And in a creative business, which museums are as well, where people sell designs, the idea of that you might be giving away your designs for free is something that you need to wrestle with as part of this process. And I would just say that what we learned in this, as part of this, is that we had not thought through all of that, and we're still learning about where our limits are in this process. So this woman here, Kat, as we call her affectionately at the Science Center, is a member of the site who started off as someone who just got interested in the project. And you see here a picture of her after we flew her to the Science Center because she was so engaged with the project via the website that she became a team member, and she kind of went over that line between general visitor engaged in the project to somebody we now possibly depend on to produce stuff, to make the exhibit happen. And what we have learned in this is that where is that line, and is there a line at all, is a ever-moving part of the process of involving the public, and that if you're doing any exhibit, model railroads is one that I could imagine somebody doing an exhibit on model railroads. And if you know anything about model railroads, there are real, what we call train geeks out there who love model railroads. And you could imagine starting this whole process, and before you got very far, you would find people who you came to depend on in this project on model railroads that were as expert as somebody who might be on staff. Or even, as a matter of fact, they're probably more of an expert than you will ever be on the subject. And so that interplay and that transition was something we did not anticipate. It's very empowering, I think, for the process and for the project. We have had members of the site develop whole research visits where we had a person from Brooklyn say, I want to show you all the food that happens in Brooklyn. And he said, show up here on a certain day. We did. He was there with a map of the 6 or 7 places in Brooklyn where we're going to visit that day: pickles, ice cream, Brooklyn Botanical Garden, etc. And then he took us on a tour of Brooklyn and the foods of Brooklyn, all from a visitor and not from a staff member generating that tour. So people transition in a variety of ways in the process that we have learned about. One of the things that became apparent very quickly is that you don't need to know a lot to be able to do this. That we use Ning as our platform for the cooking website. There are other platforms out there, but what's clear out of all of this is that it doesn't take, you don't need to be a brain surgeon to be able to do this. It's very empowering, it's very easy to do, and you learn a lot by just doing versus thinking about it and then contemplating doing it. And just 2 things. One is, don't feel scared about trying to do something like this. On the other hand, also, it may be easier to try to experiment it outside the normal rules of what goes on in a museum. That's what we did, and worked out okay at this point in time. Now our IT department wants to be involved more in the project. One of the other things we learned through the process, and I mentioned this today at the workshop, is that it has changed our process. In one way, is that we have become much more disciplined as a staff about how we document and how we work as a team in the exhibition development process. As the pink words mentioned there, if you have a meeting time where you're giving that access code and phone number and people are calling in from anywhere on the globe, If you're not there on time in the meeting room to start the meeting, there are people waiting with wait music, and they're only going to be there for a certain amount of time. So it's forced us actually to start meetings almost exactly on time, every time, which has actually been a positive thing for a variety of reasons for work, etc. We document our drawings better. We describe things more accurately. All of those things, I think, will eventually have benefits in the exhibition development process for future projects, as well as when we have to communicate with external partners, fabricators, people who build the exhibit. We'll just have practices better than we have in the past. And so the final thing I wanted to conclude on and learned is that as we have gotten, whether it's mangoes in the mail or maple syrup or blueberry chutney, is not just food in the mail, but we've gotten tons of ideas. And what that means to me is that there has been a lot of content, there's been a lot of resources been added to our process that we never would have had without the engagement of growing from 200 to 700 people as part of the process. And that's been something that has been very positive. Just some quick numbers, and just to show you, some of this is, I haven't updated these charts from last year, but this curve continues. This is the number of people who join per month, constantly going up. We find that referrals are from a variety of sources, from specific individuals to getting it through the internet, through the Liberty Science Center, from conferences, school-related. Interestingly enough, most of the people on the site are female, and that's interesting on two parts. One is there's not very often very big science subjects that we could cover where we actually get this kind of demographic shift. So we're very encouraged about that we're going to be bringing in different people, and we may be able to work at the idea of encouraging more girls, especially girls in terms of young children, to be engaged in science in a different way. Secondly, this could be evocative of the fact that we do have a good number of museum professionals, and most museum professionals are women, and so this probably skews the graph as well. So our challenge is how do we engage the public more as part of this process? We'd like to increase the membership of the site, and getting the word out about the site is one of our biggest problems. We don't really do a great job of promoting the site from a publicity standpoint because it's part of the exhibition development process. And of course, our marketing arm is not that more interested in getting visitors in the door of the Science Center than they are about getting people involved in the exhibition development process. And then, as got brought up at the workshop, we're still wrestling with this whole idea of how do we transition a site that's designed specifically for the purpose of helping us develop an exhibition and move it to a site of an actually operating exhibition, and what will that mean and how that all will work is something we're still working out. So I think that's almost it. So going back to the LSE, now the LSE Gyroscopic Museum, same context. I think we are working on a lot of the things that I just described very early on in the presentation in a variety of ways. Some of them more strongly than others. It's been a very interesting journey, but I do think that it's allowed us to practice. I don't think we're here yet, but it has empowered us to be thinking about these things in a general way and moving forward in that kind of concept. So thank you very much. We have a little time for questions. I didn't realize I was talking that long.
Those of you that have questions, please wait to have a microphone, even though Wayne may be able to hear you. You're recording this session, and using microphones helps us with recording.
Here it is. Running a meeting, keeping work on track is difficult with a small group. what happens when you have, 80, 90, 100 people come into your meeting? It's, do you have a gatekeeper? Does it matter if it's...
I would love to have that challenge. Your question is actually is a great question, because that's the kind of question the staff asked that question a lot at the beginning. And it hasn't come up in a while, but it's come up every time we decided, there was a little discussion about, could we release this information? And this information could be that we're going to have a meeting, or that we're actually all going to the local brewery to figure out how beer is made. Okay, we conceived of that as possibly being a very popular research trip to come to. And there was this reluctance in the process so far of being as open as possible, just putting it all out there. And in anticipation of getting mobbed in some way. And what we've found, we've never been mobbed, ever. And the way I perceive it is, first of all, it just comes basically to human nature, is that we all have very busy schedules, no matter whether it's busy schedules because you're a professional doing work, or you may not have that much work. You might have more family obligations, but you have probably filled your life with things that you find important. And I think it takes a while for a new thing to become as important that you make time in your life to come to do that on a consistent basis. And since that's, my guess, human nature, we have a small amount of people who spend a lot of time with us, and we have a large amount of people who I call our lurkers, who follow the site, who I meet professionally or in other ways, where they say, I get the messages, I see what's going on, it's all really fascinating, but they don't really engage with us in the idea of coming to a meeting. So I would say that the largest single amalgamation of general public in one spot for our project has been under 10, just to show. So we've never had that challenge in any way, shape, or form. Probably the thing that we've done that was the most successful of engaging people was, and I can just show it real quick if I bring the site back up, is if I go to photos and then go to albums real quick, and I was showed this earlier today, was we advertised I don't see it. Where was it? I showed it to everyone earlier. Let's see, cooking, dinner. I can't find it right now. I don't know where it went. We said, everybody shoot your dinner that night. Everybody on the site. And this was very early on in the process, so there wasn't hundreds of people, but we did get some of these are from that time. We got 30 or 40 people to actually shoot the dinner they were eating that night. And so that was actually as big a mob as we've had on doing anything at the site. If you go to the site, you'll find an album in there somewhere. I'm just missing it, of all the dinners everybody had that night. So it was kind of like a way of having our group dinner of all the members, because we couldn't all physically be at the same spot. Other questions? Find that while I hear the question. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm listening. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Do you see these gyroscopic strategies that you've talked about being as usable for primarily collections-based museums like art or archaeology museums, in which the content is, anchored in the gallery?
I would say yes. I think that it would be just different ways of doing it, but there are lots of art museums that I know of, the Brooklyn Museum and others, who have engaged people in like tagging the visit to the Brooklyn Museum and interpreting the museum in different ways. So I think that there are different models of trying to do it in respective of the content of the exhibition. And I would tell you that certain ways that we've done here, just taking cooking for example, I would tell you that this is probably more successful because of the subject matter. It's a subject matter that's easy for, it's just something we all have to do or have to engage in. And as I mentioned at the workshop, I think it was at the workshop, you know, not all of us, we all might depend on nuclear physics as something that we all, how our atoms relate to each other on a physics standpoint, our life depends on it, but we really don't encounter doing it every day. So if we were trying to do an exhibition on that subject and created this site, I suspect that we would not automatically get 700 members even in 2 years. So you may not want to do this form of integration with visitors on that subject matter. So I think it really depends on the subject. You have to think through the subject matter and then the ways you want to try to do that. Other questions? Yep. Let me see where to find.
Do you have a staff member who spends a significant amount of their time managing your site?
No, we don't. Originally, I was the significant staff member, and I was very bad at it. As you can probably imagine, I have a lot to do. So what we have is, my guess is we do not have the best site we could have if we actually dedicated someone even to this. And we're certainly limited by what the programmers of the platform we use allow us to do. That's a key aspect here. That said, we could probably be better at it if we could apply more time to the project. What tends to happen now is that we'll let the site live and we'll use it, and then what will happen is we'll be aware of a problem that comes up. An example was, if we go back to the main site, is that we were starting to put drawings up of the exhibits, and people who wanted to comment on the drawings were having problems finding the drawings, finding the content. So we realized we had to rethink how we organize. What is a blog? If we just put them up in blog posts, then they're just kind of stored in some sort of time frame of the latest blog post, and searching the blogs to find the drawings and do you have the right drawing. It was nuts. And so we created this structure now that's based on the structure of the exhibition. And now what we do is we store all of this is where you would go to find all the latest drawings and things about the exhibition, each of the exhibits. And then what we do is, because we do know that the blog is something that people, you open the page and it's the first thing you see, sort of. So it's a way of, it's still a good way of telling people what's going on right now on the project. We actually create blog posts that actually link to those other parts of the website. So we have this self kind of linking process. Whoop. My alarm just went off at 9 o'clock. So we've had to deal with those kinds of things. The other thing I was going to say is that we have been spammed occasionally on the site, where someone has joined the website. And I should mention, for you to go further than the surface page, you have to answer some very simple questions. There's like 3 simple questions you have to answer for us to be a member of the site. Like, what's your favorite food? Give you an example. And so people there have been a couple people who have gone through the process far enough to do that, and then a little bit later, we're all getting advertisements for something or other on the website. And I will tell you that we don't look at this our staff don't look at it every second. So we found out about that because members wrote us. And so in actuality, we also have our members actually doing a little bit of the work of maintaining the site as well. And it's sort of like the Wikipedia example of people self-editing the entries in there. So we have people who it's obvious that people are at least going to the site and letting us find it interesting enough to let us know, hey, there's 60 blog entries about you can rent this movie from so-and-so. That was one of the recent spams. Fortunately for the program allows you to, if somebody spams, to go in and say we're sanctioning this person because of spam, and it will go through the entire history of the website and pull everything they've ever entered into the site. So it was very easy to clean up.
Wayne, for those of us that are interested in finding out more about other museums that may be doing interesting things having to do with technology and audience engagement, are there places that you can suggest we look?
Sure. There's a couple of, first of all, there's exhibit files. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a website, which I think I can call up very quickly. If I just type in, there you go. It's a website for designers and developers of exhibitions. And certainly you can find, do a search on here about case studies and reviews of exhibits. And you could be looking for those keywords and aspects of exactly what we're talking about. There are, there's a couple of books out there that describe some of this stuff. They're all coming out of I want to say museums, etc. I could, I'm not going to remember that off the top of my head. Let me just see if I can figure that out real quick. Where would I find that? That's a good question. Might find it on Twitter real quick, because I think they just posted a, oops, sorry, you're about to hear my Twitter announcements. Here it is. Yeah, museums, etc. That's museums and ETC is a publishing firm, and they have several books on the subject of social media. As a matter of fact, we hosted a conference about mobile devices and social media that invited people from all over from Europe and the United States and Canada to come together to talk about what was going on. And 12 of the papers about people who are doing things like this is presented in there, and you can find out a lot. There's references in there to other people, so it might be an easy way to find some access to that. I think those, and then I think that if you go to places like LinkedIn, there's certainly groups about exhibits and museum design that are mentioning their work, and you could find reference to those. That's another place I would go. Anybody else? I think it's 9 o'clock. Sounds like a good time to go shovel.
Yes, thank you all for coming this evening.
Or slog through it. Thank you very much.